Okay, welcome to another episode of Ebony Tree Council Off the Top, where we like to say images have powers, and we want to bring you powerful images of positive, successful people that have stories to tell that will inspire and that will give you hope on where we headed direction as a community. And today we have an esteemed pleasure of talking to Miss Charlotte Gaines. How are you today, ma'am?
I am well. How are you, Mr. Griffin? How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for asking. It's such a treat to have you on the episode today and talk about you and your journey and some of the things you're doing. And I think that our young audience will have lots of inspiration for some things you have to share.
Perfect. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be able to share my story. Glad to be able to give back to the youth and just to encourage to let them know that you are our future. And hopefully, something you hear, you'll be able to grasp, take hold of, and take it in flight to become empowered to be whom our Creator God has created you to be in the season, in this particular time, as such as this, and just move forward.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Amen to that. So, what I'd like to do, just to get us started, just to have you kind of introduce yourself and you want to jump into the story wherever you feel comfortable, and we'll just have a conversation.
Oh Lord, it's a story. Sure. My name is Charlotte Garnes. I was born and raised, yeah, Garnes. People call me Garnes, Garnes, but born and raised in Georgia, South Georgia, small town called Lumber City, Georgia. Um, Graduated high school and went to college. But we can unfold more of my story and unpack more of my story. But right now, I'm an entrepreneur. I am the owner and CEO, founder of however people want to call it. It's so many accolades and things, titles that people give us. But I created a nonprofit called Reinforce.
Mhm.
And Reinforce is a national nonprofit who focuses on creating and facilitating trainings to businesses who are interested in incorporating system impacted or formerly incarcerated individuals into their workforce. And also, I work with system impacted and formerly incarcerated individuals coming out of prison, jail, who's interested in obtaining a career.
Mm.
Um, Opposed to just gig jobs. So my nonprofit is two prongs. I want to focus on the businesses attacking and ensuring that there's inclusivity and diversity and equity opportunities, equitable opportunities for those who are system impacted, and also for people who are like me, who is system impacted coming out of prison, ensuring that we have an opportunity to get employment, keep employment, and take care of ourselves, our families, and reintegrate back into society successfully.
Oh man, that's such a powerful, powerful mission that your organization has. And I can tell you, having worked with formerly incarcerated people, it's such a challenge to get that opportunity to get back into the workforce. And no matter how many times people will say we believe in second chances, it's rare to find employers out there that really honor that in a way that's dignifying. You know.
Yes, you use the word dignifying,
Mhm.
and that is so the cusp and what I embrace. You're absolutely right. It's amazing how you hear and how you're told that we believe in second chances. Once you do your time, that's it. Any way we can support you and things of that nature. And that's in the workforce, that's in employment, and that's post workforce. That could be in housing, that could be in mental health services, that could be in healthcare. But as someone who's formerly incarcerated, I found that to be not true. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Especially when it came to the workforce, it was difficult for a Black female
Mm.
in the South who other people considered educated um, to get an equitable opportunity just to be able to get a job paying $13 and $14 an hour.
Mm.
And being that I am someone who hold a couple of degrees, we know being here in Georgia in the South, $13 and $14 is nothing. So for people to share, and employers, I'll say that, the community and society to say, we believe in second chances, but you take away the very opportunity for me to survive. You
Mm.
take away the very opportunity for me to reintegrate, as they say, successfully into society. You take away the opportunity for me to feed myself and to be a success. It's so hard, and it's difficult. So for me, I am an entrepreneur, but I'm also an advocate. I'm also an activist, because those are the very things that Reinforce was created specifically to do, to activate and disrupt society, especially that workforce pipeline, of not allowing formerly incarcerated people the opportunity to integrate. Because I'm not going to say reintegrate, I'm going to say integrate, because people think, oh, just because you've been to prison, you're not accustomed to stuff. You're
Mm.
not, you just have a particular way of life, or you just sold drugs all your life, or you just did this all your life. No, I had a very good life. I had a very good life growing up. And even, going to undergrad, I went to undergrad. I'm the youngest of seven. My mom was a single mom. My mom only had a sixth grade education, and my mom grew up on a farm, over 100 plus acres that my great grandfather owned. So my great grandfather owned over 100 acres, and my great grandfather would rent some of his land to grow crops. And in renting some of that land to grow crops, he would sell those crops to Piggly Wiggly. He would sell those crops to Winn-Dixie and other places. So he stopped my mom from getting an education in the sixth grade and had her to work the farm. So by the time I came, my mom was a single mom. It was seven of us. I was the baby. So all I ever heard growing up was, you get an education and you get out of here. It was the South. You get an education and you get out of here. And that not only came from my mom, but that came from my great grandfather as well. Like, for a Black female, for anybody Black, you need an education, and that's your ticket out. So, growing up, we had cousins and things of that nature who lived up north. And for me, it was a clear distinction of the Northerners versus the
Yes.
Southerners.
Yes. Yes. Yes, indeed.
So for us Southerners, what we what we knew was get an education and flee.
Mhm.
So for me, that's all I knew. I wasn't the typical child, I would say, because for me, I love to read. That was my escape. I love to get books. And I remember when I was young, I was 5 or 6, maybe. I didn't know how to read, but I love magazines. I love pictures. I love colors. I love looking at things in the magazine. And I remember one of my favorite magazines, and I taught myself how to read. One of my favorite magazines was Time magazine.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember learning how to fill out the postage. And I remember ordering some Time magazines in my sister's name. And so my
Talk about
sister,
innovation.
yes. And so my sister started getting these Time magazines, and she was my oldest sister. So she had moved out of the house by the time I came along, because she was married and things of that nature. So she started getting these Time magazines at the house and getting this bill like, who got Time magazines? And I would be like, those are my magazines. Like, that's mine. And she was like, how dare you order magazines in my name? But for me, I love to read, and I love those pictures, and those things became an escape for me, because those are things I didn't see. I remember growing up watching the news and watching the Berlin Wall come down, and me asking my mom, what's happening? What does that mean? And seeing people in the street yell and fight. And for some reason, that became like, wow, people are angry. People want change. They're fighting. And I remember my mom saying, people fight and yell and get that way because they don't like how things are. They
Right.
want change. So for me, that began to spark some things in me. And then I remember things happening with Rodney King and me sitting in front of the TV watching it. And I'm like, we need to go fight. We need to go do something. My mom was like, wait, calm down. That's in California. That wait, hold on. And I'm like, why can't we do that? And
Mhm.
so I remember feeling like I wanted to fight and hone in on some things that wasn't right. So I grew up, education was the key, went to graduated high school. Part of that growing up in high school was my mouth. I
Mm.
was very vocal at the time and still vocal at the time and was very vocal and I fought a lot. And I can remember getting suspended. And I remember getting suspended, but my grades never failed. And
Interesting.
I remember my senior year. My principal, Anthony McIver, brought me in the first day of school, my senior year, and he said, "Look, if you fight this year, you're not going to prom." When he said that, I was like, "Oh, I got to get myself together because I want to go to prom, right?"
Yes, yes, indeed.
So I didn't fight that year, but I graduated with a 3.8 GPA. And I
Mm.
was blessed to get a Hope Scholarship. And from that scholarship, I went to Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia. I graduated with a justice studies, criminal justice undergrad, and I minored in sociology. And from there, I moved to Atlanta for maybe a couple of years and didn't like it. I went to Charlotte because I love to travel. I went to Charlotte, North Carolina one weekend with one of my best friends and actually fell in love with the look of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mhm.
So I was like, you know what? I want to move there. And everybody was like, but you don't know anybody there. I said, so what? So I gave myself a year. I put it on my refrigerator and I gave myself a move out date on my refrigerator. And from that move out date, I drove to Charlotte twice a month looking for a job. And I got a job. And I remember working the job, staying in a hotel. And once I got my first check, I was able to drive back to Atlanta, packed as much as I could in my Mazda 626, and I went back and I got an
Mazda
apartment.
626.
Got an apartment, slept on the floor until I was able to build from there. And building from there. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So you shared quite a bit with us. And I'm really excited to pick into some of those areas
Oh
there.
yeah, come
And
on.
I wanna step back to high school because as much as you said you had a lot of passion and you wanted to do things and you wanted to be heard, you were able to still have a 3.8 GPA.
Oh, that wasn't a education wasn't a joke for me
Hmm.
because I knew that I began to see and unpack the importance of that was my way out. Growing up, I can count probably on one hand how many Black teachers
Hmm.
I had in elementary and junior high school because I was in a predominantly white area. So I can count on one hand how many Black teachers that I had. So when I would get a Black teacher and they would pour into me, I love that. Like I love hearing and I love learning. So for me, even though I was angry and I felt the anger, but I
Hmm.
couldn't understand as a teenage female what I was angry about.
Right.
I didn't know. So for me, it would be even when I would get suspended, before I would get kicked out of class, it would be give me my homework assignments. Give me, because I was going to be home. I might as well have
Might as
something
well
to
do
do
it. That's right.
other than cleaning up because my mama was going to make me clean up. So, so I had to learn. And so for me, that was my passion. Even it was like, even though I made poor decisions, the best decision or the one decision that I knew I could control was that GPA. And I
Mhm.
had to do that. And I had to understand that to know this is the only way you're going to be able to do something different. Because growing up, that's all we were told. Because for Black people in the South, that education opens so many doors and allows you to have opportunities. So for me, it was
Absolutely.
important to do that.
Absolutely. Man, that's amazing. And so that dedication and that focus that you had in high school, wondering how did that serve you when you were in college?
Oh, wow. You know what? College for me opened up a whole new can of worms in the sense of I began to see other people who look like me, right? And I began to hear their experiences. I began to be around other Black people who thought it was cool to be smart, who would
Mhm.
get up and go to class, it wasn't just about partying. Yeah, you partied, but you know what I mean? Like you still began to see a whole new world of people who were focused. It wasn't just you, or it wasn't just a few of you, it was so many more of you. And I think that was important. So that focus began to like mold me, really, because then it became with the girlfriends and the friends that I had, we were all, this is what we're doing. This is we got to do this. And I can remember it was four of us, and we called ourselves the crew.
That's right.
And we had one other young lady who wanted to be a part of us. Do you know what we looked at in order to determine if she was going to be a part of the
Don't
crew?
say it.
Her GPA.
A GPA. Hey, you know what? You have to have a discerning spirit when you're, that's right. And you need some criteria to kind of make sure you set a mark.
Yes. And that was the
That's
thing. And
interesting.
I remember, and we laugh about this even to this day. We put
Uh-huh.
her on probation. We were like, look, you can't, in order to move with us, like
Mhm.
you're gonna have to take some things seriously. And it's ironic that you call it focus now, because we didn't take it as that. We just took it as this is just who we are. You know what I mean? And like you said, having that discerning spirit, we know we didn't want to just hang around anyone, right? So for us, it was the educational component. So having that in college, it is still, even to this day, and sometimes I have to, it has to balance out for me, because sometimes my focus can be so tunnel vision to where it forces me to not give other things attention, and sometimes that could be of a detriment. And
Okay.
God is truly having to teach me balance. God is truly having to show me, like, you're going to get there. Be patient. This is what focus looks like in a healthy way. And I thank him for that teaching, because focus was also, and I can say this, focus was also part of the issue of me going to prison,
Mhm.
because I was so focused and driven with a particular thing that I didn't pay attention to the things going on around me, to where poor decisions was made, poor choices was made. I was put in certain situations that I was so focused on that end result that I couldn't see the foolishness and the deception and the evilness around me, to
Mhm.
where God had to show me that.
Man, that's very, very interesting that you share that. And I do want to dig in that because it sounds like we have some really good nuggets in there for our audience.
Yes.
What was the toughest lesson you had to learn in college about yourself?
Or by myself, you said?
About yourself.
About myself. Um, wow, that's a good question. I think the toughest lesson that I've had to learn in college, that I still continue to learn, is it's okay to fail.
Mhm.
It's okay to fail. Because I can remember in college, like I said, my undergrad was criminal justice studies, and I minored in sociology. And don't get me wrong now, because this was the thing. I had such a high intellect in high school to where I didn't have to study for a lot of things, right?
Mm.
It just became easy for me. I was in what they call college prep classes, things of that nature. So it was very easy for me. But when I got to college, I didn't take, I thought, oh, it will be the same as high school. No, 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 no. You have to set up study. You have to learn how to note take. You have to learn those intricate pieces to help you be successful. So I can remember one of my less strong suits, I'm not going to say one of my barriers or things I'm not good at, one of my less strong suits is math.
Mm.
And I can remember having to take college algebra twice because it was that thing of I gotta get it A, I gotta get it perfect. I gotta get no, no, no. You make sure you learn the lessons, even if it's not an A, it could be a B, it could be a C. But at the same time, even in that, although I may be shooting for A and I received a B, it's not failure. You
Okay.
didn't fail. Exactly. You fail when you don't try. You fail when you don't give it your all. You didn't fail anything. You passed this class and you're on to the next thing. So for me, I would say the one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn in college, and I continue to still learn it, is you're not failing. It's okay not to succeed on the first try,
Mhm.
but you're not, it's not a failure, and
Yeah.
it's okay to kind of take a step back and not it's okay to take a step back and shift your focus
Mhm.
and be okay with that. So just learning that, even to
Wonderful.
this day, is something, and it's something that I embrace as well.
Yes. Outstanding. One of the things we like to tell kids at every tree council is that you're winning or you're learning. So every time you have to take a step back and shift, that's a learning moment for you.
Yes.
And you should take that moment and pause and reflect and says, what am I being taught at this time that I didn't know before? And
Mhm.
how can I improve on that going forward as opposed to, oh, I failed. And so I like the way you put that. It's like sometimes you have to take a shift and redirect to
Yes.
continue moving forward.
Yes. And I've found even with the reshifting
Mhm.
and the redirection, it's a process in learning because it teaches you about you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Whereas, like I said, in high school, I didn't have to study. But when I got to college, it set me down to show me like, no,
Mhm.
you gotta learn, you gotta study, things are different. And that forced me to learn more about me in a situation to know, okay, let me quiet my mind. Let me set my goals. Let me manage my time. Let me do the things differently that was so easy for me in high school, but now they no longer serve their purpose. Now I'm learning, as the elders say, you're growing up, right?
Mhm.
Now
Mhm.
you're growing up. Your responsibilities change, your shift change, your focus change. So for me, it's always a lesson to be learned, right? It's
Absolutely.
not failure. So when you take that step back and you're able to learn not only from the situation or about yourself, it automatically places you 10 steps ahead as to where you once were before.
What do you imagine our young people can do to prepare themselves for those shifts that happen?
I think the biggest thing is know that they're going to come
Mm.
and know the warning signs, right? If you're, and what I mean by that is, if you're trying to do something and it's working for everybody else but you, take a step back and go back to what you said.
Mm.
Have that discerning spirit to say, is this for me, right? Is this where I need to be? Just because it's working for them over there, Is this where I need to be? And once you begin to learn that about you, to say, you don't have to be a part of everything. You don't have to do everything like everyone else. Sometimes, not sometimes, God creates special people for special circumstances and special projects in a season. So
Season.
maybe this is your season. That
Mhm.
was their season over there, but this is your season.
Mhm.
And I think when we begin to know and learn when it's our season and when it's not our season, I think that's the biggest thing that helps. And with the youth and with your participants, I think it's just so important of embracing who they are. Because it burns my spirit when I hear so many youth suffer depression,
Mhm.
suffer mental health challenges in the sense of not being comfortable with who they are, not being sure of who they are, or being upset with certain things about themselves to where they're unable to embrace that. And that bothers me so much because, I mean, we all, as youth, we all have that identity, like going through, like, as a teenager. That's normal. That shift is normal. But when you begin to have those thoughts and the repercussions of having those thoughts are self mutilation, are taking medications to help you cope, using substances to help you cope, that's when it becomes problematic for me. Because when I when I got my master's, I got a master's in counseling. I counseled youth. I was a youth counselor, and it would really weigh heavy on my spirit to have so many youth come before me, especially youth that look like me, right? That would come in and they would share with me, like, I cut myself because I'm not happy with who I am. I look in the mirror and I see, I don't like what I see. And for me, what is it about what you see that you don't like? And it was things that they would see on TV, other people, or Facebook, and those type of things. And so just working with them to a place of comfortability, of embracing who they are, I think that became so important for me. And I still see it now. And that weighs heavy in my spirit.
That's interesting that you brought that up too, because in November 2021, Harvard produced a study that said that the rate of depression, mental illness among young people is on the rise. It's almost twice what it was a year before the pandemic. And the pandemic has definitely exacerbated that. But even now, there's so many issues that our young people have to contend with. It's overwhelming, and they look to all types of activities and substances to numb the pain of having to face, figuring out who they are. And it's a little bit scary at times.
It is. And as a parent, I could not imagine having that responsibility of working with my youth to feel comfortable and knowing that you are who God created for me as a mother. I love you, and having the youth feel sometimes that the love, the unconditional love that they receive from their family or their mothers, their fathers, siblings is not enough. And I think part of the issue, like you said, the pandemic truly has shown us as a nation the rate of responsibility we want to take when it comes to mental health. It's hard to find service providers. It's hard to especially find service providers who look like us,
Mhm.
who's willing to get into a space of addressing and helping youth work through those barriers of self-esteem.
Yes.
So it is, and I feel like the more that there's a connection to social media, and social media continues to display unrealistic images, unrealistic um, information about not only society, but us as Black people. I honestly think that the depression rate, the suicide rate, all of that is going to increase, because if this is all we see and we're depicted from a negative state of mind or negative connotation day in and day out, you do begin to ask, where's my worth?
Yes, indeed.
Where truly,
Mhm.
where do I fit into society as a Black male? Where do I fit in society as a Black female? Where is that? And
Yes.
as long as we continue to have that in social media, it's going to be a difficult pill to swallow for us.
Yes. And that's one of the challenges that we've taken on at Ebony Tree Council. In our programs, we focused on inside out approach to
Mhm.
developing kids where they learn how to appreciate who they are inside, who they belong to, and give them a head and heart coherency that allows them to be confident when they go out and away from their network and support systems, so that they can be okay in surviving while they're out there.
Yes. And you hit the nail on the head when you said this one word, survival.
Mhm.
Right now, for our youth, for us, we are in the state of survival. We are having to survive. And I would love for us to be able to get out of that. But I don't foresee us having the capability of doing that anytime soon. And it's not like we want to stay in that state of mind, right? Like,
Mhm.
I know so many of us as Black people just want peace, right? We want
Just
peace.
want
We
peace.
want equality. We
Yeah.
want that. But society has so made us feel like we have to do everything within our power to
Mhm.
survive. And that causes so much havoc, that causes so much fear, that
Mhm.
causes so much doubt within our culture, to where, as you see, we're beginning to not even know who we are anymore, not even know our worth. So I embrace and applaud you all for doing that, because it is such a need. It is such a clarion call for our youth right now, because the attack against us as a people is blatantly out. So
Yes, entirely.
if they've already incarcerated or enslaved our fathers and our mothers, who's next?
Who's next?
Our youth.
Mhm.
And we see that through the prison to pipeline.
Yes.
It is a clarion call for
Mhm.
their soul and for their labor.
And it not only does it cause us to cloud our own image when it comes to self-love, it causes other people in other cultures to look at us from a dirty lens, a lens that's not really who we are, because they're falling for the same thing.
Yes.
No.
Yes. And that was depicted in the Ahmaud Arbery trial. We saw
Mhm.
that. We saw that depiction in that very trial as to how he was described. And we know, being here, that's nothing new, but to blatantly have it called out, to how he was dressed, his mental health, to his toenails and things
Mhm.
like, must we be depicted as the animal at all times?
Mhm.
Is that your only concept of us as a people? So, in your mind and in your vision, as a white or a non Black society, we're not mothers, we're not fathers, we're not sisters, we're
Mhm.
not daughters, we're not brothers, we're not uncles, we're not aunts, we're not friends, we're not lovers, we're not children, we're not smart teenagers, we're not the dancing machines, we're not the football players, we're not the basketball players that's making you millions of dollars. We're animals.
Right. That's right.
We're animals. And society has grown so accustomed to saying that about us to where that's how we're now treated.
One thing I can really appreciate about where we are right now is at least my impression that there's an awakening that's happening that's causing us and other people to really look behind the veil and recognize a trope as a trope and recognize a dog whistle as a dog whistle and call it what it is and force those people to explain and clarify in a way that makes sense, and they can't do it.
They cannot do it. And you are so right. Because I remember um, first watching his video, of course, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, like those murders, like watching that and seeing that. And it is, I think it was Will Smith who said it, like, this has always happened. Now it's just being recorded and it's putting out there. And I think if the pandemic has not exposed anything else, it's truly exposed what we've had to deal with for so many years.
Yes, indeed.
And as you said, that shift and that awakening has began to create within so many of us that fight, that advocacy, that willingness to take it to the streets and to take it to spaces, not just the streets, to take it to courtrooms, to take it to boardrooms, to take it to the lawmakers, to say, we demand change. Like we don't want anything else from y'all. As much as we deserve as a people, we don't want your land. We don't want your mule. We don't want any of that. We just want equality and respect and our liberty. That's it.
That's right. That's right.
That's it.
I so much appreciate your passion, and I could talk to you all day along this line. I would be remiss if I didn't get people to understand more about who you are, though. So I'm going to go like this and talk about that passion, because most of the time, passion, when people take passion and turn it into purpose, oftentimes it comes from a painful experience. And I want to kind of understand that journey for you, what brought you through the pain and passion to purpose that you have today.
Got you. So for me, like I said, this passion was kind of there. And I can honestly say that that passion became concealed. It became hidden for a while, right? Like kind of like out of sight, out of mind. If it doesn't affect me, or if it's not next to me, it doesn't affect me. So it's of no worry to me. So I've always been an advocate. Hence the justice studies. So as I shared, moved to Charlotte, got my master's, opened up a counseling practice. From opening up a counseling practice, I began to work with youth who look like me, who is a part of the juvenile system, the juvenile justice system, who is a part of the foster care system and things of that nature. Built out a private practice, having people working for me and billing and everything like that. Began to expand out that focus, had vision. Began working on a PhD and things of that nature. Again, education, focus. In the midst of hiring some people, hired some shady characters. And you talk about knowing discernment. And the thing about discernment is we have it. God has given that gift to us.
Yes, indeed.
But we don't use it. We don't use it. And that became the issue. God showed things to me and I didn't pay attention to it because, again, I was focused on what Charlotte wanted, not on what he wanted. And so got indicted to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, had conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, making false statements in healthcare matters, and obstruction, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison.
Mm.
And from that, the very thing that the judge used against me when he gave me those 5 years was, with your education, you was too educated not to have taken more responsibility. You
Oh,
was too
wow.
educated not to have known. So that very thing my mother and my grandfather pushed me to do was the very thing that white judge slammed that gavel on and told me, you got 60 months in a federal prison.
My goodness. My goodness.
So with that, was sentenced to, like I said, 5 years. I wasn't able to go to, because sometimes when you go to prison, they allow you to turn yourself in, or what they call self-surrender. I
Mhm.
wasn't able to do that because me being vocal, the judge and we had a conversation that he didn't find appealing.
Mm.
And one of the things that I can say, one of the things that made me become vocal was the judge told me, I need for you to admit that you are a criminal. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to say that I am a criminal. And when I refused to say I was a criminal, he let me have it. And I told him, I said, that's fine. You can do what you want to do, but I refuse to admit that I am a criminal. I won't say
Mm.
that. And so for me, that began to tear down and strip me of everything that I thought I knew about a system, because you wanted me as a Black female to acknowledge and admit that very thing as to how you saw me.
Mm.
And I wasn't going to do that. Just as we talked about how they see us as animals, just because I'm convicted, you in your court, I'm convicted, I am not a criminal.
Mm.
And so they remanded me in court that day, which means the day I got sentenced was the day I started my prison sentence. And so I went to different holding facilities and I became stationed or imprisoned in Marianna, Florida.
Mm.
And while you're in prison, people think, oh, prison. No, I had to work in prison. Prison was, prison probably was the worst experience that I had. But I worked in prison. And when I got to the prison, I just wanted to do my time. That's it. Like, let me do these 5 years, leave me alone. I'm good. And I had an officer to come to me. I got a job in the library because I love to read. And I was just in the library and this officer came to me and he said, I read your file. And I said, okay, Ann. And he said, you love education. I said, I do. And he said, what do you think about teaching the GED class? I said, no, I'm good. I just want to do my time.
Mhm.
I just want to do my time and be left alone. He was like, would you consider coming to evaluate and just look at the class and then you can decide? He said, because I think the women would benefit from what you have to offer. And I promised him I would. So a couple of days later, I went to the GED class and there was women, Mr. Griffin, when I say there was women old enough to be my mom
Mm.
in that class that did not have an education, that couldn't do certain things. God began to stir and unfold that passion that was ever so buried in me. And he began to stir in my spirit. And so I went back to the officer and I told him, I said, okay, I'm going to try this now. But I'm going to tell you now, I'm a fighter. And the first time somebody say something slick, it's going to be a problem. And I began to teach the women in the education.
Mm.
And within the first year, 17 women got their GED.
Oh, congratulations. That's
Thank
beautiful.
you. And so at that moment that I began to plan those graduations, and women who had been sitting in that class 2 years or a year before I even hit the compound to be able to get a GED and cry and call their kids and say, I did it. And then be going home in a few months, God began to show me that passion, that fight. So then I'm like, okay, God, and God began to show me, think it not strange that you're here. It's some things that I needed you to do. Cause I remember before incarceration, I love music. I love gospel music. And I remember singing, I was in Okinawa, Japan, because I was working with the government at the time. And I remember singing For Your Glory at the top of my lungs.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying, I'll go where you want me to go. I'll do what you want me to do. I'll say what you want me to say. And when I was in prison, God began to stir up spiritual gifts in me. And one of the gifts that God has given me is dreams and visions.
Mm.
And I remember being on my top bunk and going back in a dream to Okinawa, Japan, and that song being played and me singing that to the top of my lungs. And I woke up out that dream and I was like, but I didn't want to be here, God. I know what I said, but it wasn't here. But his spirit said it wasn't what you wanted, it's what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And you need this for your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, that was my fight. My fight and my passion began to educate and advocate for the women incarcerated. And that was my thing. I'm like, if I'm here, I might as well fight. If I'm here, I might as well do it. And so my second year, 20 women graduated with their GED.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I began to push back to the officers to say, okay, help me to understand why we don't have classes, why we don't have this, why we don't have that. So then I got on this mission. I began to create more classes for the women. I began to reach out to other women who had degrees and who had experience in certain things. We created a whole curriculum, changed the whole compound, put on talent shows, and did different things to get other women to see experience, empowerment, to embrace education, and to know every year in February, we put on Black History Month, Black History something to educate people and to embrace. Because what God showed me was it may not be the place you want to be, but it's the place that I need you. And even in this, you will be blessed. When I tell you, I saw so many blessings in his hand in the 46 months that I was incarcerated. And God began to educate me spiritually and feed me and usher me into a season of knowing like, this is what you were created for. Like, this was your purpose. Yes, counseling and everything is your purpose, but this is it. And it comes from a place of advocacy. It comes from a place of fight. It comes from a place of just making sure everything that you touch is okay. And right now, I need you to be the educational healing balm for other people. And so I embraced that. And so what it became for me was I always knew that exiting prison, I couldn't let that fire die down. I refused to let that fire die down. I refused to stop advocating. I refused to stop fighting, because when I began to study the carceral system, I began to see that it's set up, it's doing exactly what it was created to do.
Absolutely.
It was
it's not a flaw. That's just the design.
It's not. Because when you begin to study and you begin to see that everything was set up on those enslavement laws to where, okay, you don't want to be a slave no more. Let me get you for this and put you in prison where you have no choice but to be a slave. Okay, you don't want to do this anymore. Let me take your wife and do the same thing and put her in prison to where she's enslaved. Okay, your children. You don't want to do that anymore. Let me take your children. Let me break y'all up to the point of where the Black family no longer looks like what it used to look like. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And then we got youth in prison. We got families in prison. Then we got siblings in foster care, not knowing where they truly come from. So when I say the system is doing that very thing that it was created to do,
Yes, indeed.
and being a part of that system as someone who's formerly incarcerated, I didn't have a choice but to fight because
Mhm.
I refused to let what I went through be my niece, my nephew, my anybody else that's tied to me. So the fight, it had to continue, right? Like I wasn't gonna serve all this time. And this is one of the things that I would tell the women because I remember some of the women got written up about something. They had done something, and it was something minute, and they knew where to come to. They knew if it was going to be a fight and it was pen to paper, go to Charlotte. She gonna tell you.
Yes, indeed.
And that's what I did. When they got written up, I went through every guideline, every rule, every regulation that it was supposed to benefit us as people who were in prison. And I took it and I would write a rebuttal. And then it got to the point to where the head officer, he was like the hearing officer. He asked one of the ladies, he said, "Who did y'all's paperwork? I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to the person who did y'all's paperwork. Who did y'all's paperwork? Because the way this is written up," and they said the girl in education. And so they called down to the officer and they said, "Can you send your education clerk up here?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I went up. He was like, "Miss Garnes, they want you to come up to the front." I'm like, "What I do?" Like, you know what I mean? What?
Mhm.
So I went up there and the officer was like, "What is your background?" And I said, am I in trouble?" He was like, "No, but I'm trying to figure out where did you get this education?" Because your this is written up like an attorney. Are you an attorney? I said, "No, I'm not an attorney." I said, "But I have some familiarity with the systems. I'm very accustomed to the systems because I worked in those very systems. So I
Mhm.
knew it." And he was like, "Just off of their paperwork alone, I can't even do nothing with them. I'm gonna have to throw this out." And I said, "That's what we
That's
wanted."
what you wanted. That's
That's
right.
exactly what we wanted. And so from there, I think I began to help other women to have a voice. Like, you don't have to accept being an inmate. You don't have to accept being a criminal. You don't have to accept those may have been mistakes that I made, but that's not how I identify. And I push that for women because, and I push that for men too, because I still fight for my brothers.
Mhm.
But I began to address that because that's what that system that was created to do, was to strip us of every piece of dignity we had, every strip of pride, every ounce of confidence, every ounce of self-esteem. And so to me, by the prison system doing it, social media is doing the very same thing to our youth. So to me, it's
Absolutely.
going hand in hand with what we said about the prison system. Social media is doing the very thing it was created to do.
Mhm. And it's a very subtle shift that if we're not careful of, our kids will be caught up in that system. And just like a lot of our young brothers and sisters have been in the past in the correction system, because there are so many pathways that they have designed to put us on that pipeline, and we're
Yes,
not paying attention to. And the
at all.
metaverse is one of those things that looks and smells and feels just like the beginning of the old Jim Crow system,
Yes,
but in our time frame back in the day, it was vagrancy was that catch-all that they could use to get you on anything to lock you up. Now
yes.
it's going to be lack of access that's going to be the thing that's going to cause you to be locked up.
Exactly. And you're so right. And the thing about the system for our youth is you hit the net, it's starting even younger because it's starting now, third grade. third grade, they're already building. It's a problem when society spends more money in prisons than in education.
Absolutely.
It's a problem when you have no problem spending billions in education, but you can't forgive people student loans just in case they want to further their education. It's a problem in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like we're saying, is if we it's an awakening
Mm-hmm.
that we are experiencing, but I would love for us to be awakened to no blinders, because some of us are still operating with blinders on, but to be operating from a space of no blinders and having no fear, because we're still, so many of us are still fearful to rock that boat, to
Yes.
call out what we see as Jim Crow, or to go advocate for the youth and say, no, you're not going to label him, or no, you're not going to label her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that fear, but they do it so subtly. As we said earlier, the subtleness is there to where I don't, am I seeing what I'm seeing? Am I
Mm-hmm.
hearing what I'm hearing? Because when you have that doubt, it silences you because you're not going to speak out. And I think that although we have an awakening, I think that awakening needs to stay fueled. It needs to stay, we need to stay awoke, like definitely. And just knowing that we can't succumb to those things, those traps that they have set out for us, because they are out there. They are definitely out there.
And we can't behave in the same patterns that they've been able to predict time and time again. Acquiesce on something small and let the crowd bow down, and then continue to do what you've done all along. And we've
Yes.
seen that cycle over and over again over the last few centuries for us, as a people, that we celebrate the peanuts. Not to say the peanuts aren't important, but in the grander scheme of things, what's being yielded to us is nothing compared to what we're capable of taking control of and being responsible for as our own people.
Oh my God, you're so right. And that's like, that's why I said, it's okay to take it to the streets,
Mhm.
but we need to learn to get in spaces. We need to be in boardrooms making decisions. We need to be in Senate seats and council seats making decisions and things of that nature, and on school boards and in spaces to where we began to shift, and we began to demand that shift. Because even, for example, even in workforce development, how many people are passed over from positions based off of, it could be just them checking black on an application and things of that nature. So when we get into spaces such as those higher up positions, and we're taking it and demanding that equality there, that's when we will, to me, will fuel that fire to where we're staying woke, and is we're no longer doing the things the same, and we're calling people out on their mess and letting
Mhm.
them know, like, no, it's not okay to bypass me, and it's not okay, when she and I have the same qualifications, that you've just chosen her because the color of her skin and things of that nature. And I think sometimes that some of our young people become oblivious to those things still exist. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, indeed.
And it's like, we've had to endure and deal with so much that, and I can't remember who said it, that it may be Kanye back in his old days. Not the new Kanye,
Not
but
the
the
new
old,
kind.
yeah, not the new
I
Kanye, but
love
the
it.
old Kanye, when he says racism still exists, they just doing it differently. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So we have to be cognizant of that. We
Mhm.
have to be aware of that, because it's not going to be bold and in your face. It's going to be slick, sly, being labeled in the third grade as a problem child. It's going to be being labeled, with mental health, and they need medication, but mom can't afford it. And this is why he acts out like that. It's going to be all these schools got police officers
Yes. And metal detectors. Mm-hmm.
And where are your social workers?
Mm-hmm.
Where are your counselors? Where are your PTAs? Where are you bringing your parents together? I don't know where you got those people at, but you sure hired a police officer. You hiring more than one because you got one in the office, one in the school, and then you got one standing by the buses. And these are not just resource officers. These are certified gun on hip police
Right.
officers.
That's right.
You know? And so when we began to realize like this is real, like this is happening.
And it sends a message to our children to have those figures patrolling the hallways and
Yes,
things like that, and not being allowed to have quality resources to learn with. You
exactly.
know.
I one of I was reading Stacey Abrams' book, and
Mhm.
I can't remember. I have it over there on the thing, and she talked about at the beginning of her book, the one that talks about lead from a certain place,
Mhm.
the importance of why she wanted to win the 2020 election, not the 2018 election, the 2018 election. And what she talked about was that particular election that they cheated, they stole from her.
Yeah.
It was pivotal. And the reason why Stacey said that election was pivotal because the person that was coming into the office at that time would have the mandate and the power to redistrict
Mm.
a lot of zip codes, will redistrict a lot of resources.
Mm.
And that was her fight to be governor of Georgia because she was going to do some shifting at that time and she was going to do some things differently. And so then when I began to like, okay, what was going on at the time? The census.
The census. Mm-hmm.
All of that tied together because if she would have been in office, then the census would have taken place. Then everything, oh, so then with her being in office, the census happening, we're getting more money, then we can redistribute
Resources. Yes,
resources
indeed.
for
Yes,
people
indeed.
who look like us, for people who need like us,
Mhm.
for people who think like us. And look, lo and behold, what happened.
I
The
love it.
The other
Uh-huh.
knew the importance of her getting in the office in that season, in that time.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, it's amazing because you began to see the extreme that one would do to stop the very thing that he knew would change a whole nation. Because when this last election, if
Mm-hmm.
this didn't prove anything else to us as a state, they needed us.
Yes,
They
indeed.
needed us to the point of where the results of Georgia flipped the whole nation,
With the
not
whole
just the
nation.
South. We flipped
Mhm.
the whole nation.
That's right.
So with that being said, if that don't get your feet on fire to know that we as a Black people, we hold that power
Mm-hmm.
and they are afraid if we're able to tap into and truly understand the power we hold within us because we're able to flip a nation. So, this is why I'm going to start with your kids. This is why I'm going to start tearing down that self esteem to where they don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take your men out of your home. I'm going to take your women out of the home to where no one is able to pour into your youth because
That's right. How
the
soon do you think that we should start teaching our kids about civic and social awareness and responsibility?
I remember growing up,
Mhm.
I remember seeing my mom. My mom would take people to the polls in her car. she would take people to the polls. And when I would say, well, why do you do that? She was like, they don't have a ride. Okay, what does that have to do with you? You need to vote. You need to understand what it means to vote. And I can remember voting for the first time at Georgia Southern. Like I can remember that because that's what I saw my mom do, right? And when I began to understand, because I think we get it wrong, and I say we because I had it wrong too. I had to learn, like, oh, we just vote for the president and we're good. No, 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 no. When I went through the judicial system and I began to see, because one of the things is I began to learn, right? When, like I said before, when you start having things happen to you, you begin to like, okay, let me research, let me learn, let me know. When I began to see who appointed my federal judge, when I began to see how the prosecutor got in the office and how that began to open my eyes like, oh, so y'all been put this sucker in motion for
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like, whoa.
It's hiding in plain sight.
Hiding in plain sight. So to answer your question, and it warmed my heart the last time we had an election and I voted. Women, Black women, my sisters, had babies on their hips, had babies in strollers, had babies with their hands, showing them the importance of voting. And I think when we start as young as possible to at least let them see this is what mommy and daddy are doing, and begin to educate them at the age of understanding. It could be 5, it could be 6, it could be more, a little bit older, but to have those conversations, I think is so vital to us as a people and to us understanding. People, like I would hear my mom say that, like people died for you to be able to cast that vote.
Amen.
And so growing up, you'd be like, I know about it from history, but when you literally know about it because it's affected you some way, you don't, that's a civil liberty you don't take lightly. Like,
Right.
Like literally, people have died to cast that vote.
Absolutely.
Yes, very crucial.
I remember when my kids were young, and I realized the importance of them being more aware of what's happening. I started doing things like working in the polling station, being a probationary judge, and then have the kids come and hang out with dad and watch him go through this election process so they can see what it was. And so then I can explain, this is why I'm here. And this is what's as important for us as a people. So, and it stuck with them all those years, fortunately, too.
Yes. And I think that's so important because as parents, I'm not a parent, but I have nieces and nephews. It's kind of like we've been taught to don't ask questions or just do what I tell you to do. But we have to understand as a people, no question asked is the dumb question. No question, when you ask that question, that's not a dumb question. It's that silence of not asking. That's the dumb question. Because when you ask questions, you learn. When you ask questions, you figure things out. When you ask questions, that opens your mind and hopefully sometimes changes the viewpoint that you once held. Because as you're asking questions, you're beginning to learn. And I think, we as a people, that's something we have to embrace and help our young folk to understand, like, it's okay to ask questions with respect. Now don't get
Respect.
pop. Yeah, don't get pop just asking questions. But ask that question.
Be curious, but not defiant. Be curious.
That's it. And so, that's the thing. Yeah.
Miss Charlotte, man, we're going to have to get you back definitely because there's so many things that you and I need to talk about. Oh my goodness, about what's happening in our community and how we can fix it. When we
Yes,
come back, and we're going to talk about, I want to put it on the books right now, though. We're
please.
going to talk about self-sustaining communities as opposed to trying to fight our way into a system that
Yes.
is trying to keep us out. But we're going to put a pin in that one, but we're definitely getting back to it for sure.
I love it.
Uh, I wanted to take a moment now to just, kind of wind us down here and just get some thoughts from you in a couple of different areas. Because I know that, so you have your hands in a bunch of different areas, and one of which we didn't get a chance to talk about, but I know that I'm going to add into the show notes your work at the Bail Project,
Yes.
as well as the nonprofit that you're in charge of right now, too. What's next for you?
You know what? I I don't know. That was, and it's amazing that you asked that question. That was my prayer this morning.
Mhm.
Like, what's next? Um, I want to be his vessel.
Mm.
Wherever he takes me. And I know the last time I said that, I was in a place I didn't really want to be. But I can say that place in which I didn't want to be has afforded me the opportunity to be sitting here with you.
Yes.
Because I know if it was left up to me, I wouldn't be here at all.
Mhm.
So again, what I asked to do for his glory is for him. I've thought about definitely doing more advocacy work, but definitely continuing to help formerly incarcerated individuals and people coming out of prison and jails to get employment. Another avenue that I'm looking into is housing for those who are system impacted. Right now, as you said, I work with the Bail Project. I'm the operations manager, and one of my sites is the Augusta site. And I'm here in Augusta. And it breaks my heart because the lack of services and the lack of resources that Augusta does not have for people who are formerly incarcerated, coming out of jail. They can't get housing, they can't get employment, they can't get mental health services. They don't, and it's like we've created a system to set people up to fail. Like, I went to Costa Rica for vacation because I always love to travel out of the country to see how other countries live. And being that I'm now formerly incarcerated, one of the questions I always ask countries now is, what's your criminal justice system like? What is that like? And so I asked the guy, like, if I went to prison over here and I got out, he said, the government helps to take care of you. They help you with housing, they help you with employment. And I'm like, wait a minute. We supposed to be the richest, the smartest, the most powerful country in the whole world. And you mean to tell me little bitty Costa Rica that don't even have an army has gotten the very thing we struggle with, right? For the last, I think it was 25 years, our prison population has gone up 800%.
My goodness. Wow.
So for me, knowing that Augusta does not have things, resources to help people be successful, coming out of jail, coming out of prison, I asked God, what is next for me? What do you have for me to do? What is my clarion call in this season? And whatever that clarion call is, I know you're going to give me the resources to achieve what it is that you've set before me. So to answer your question, right now, I'm going to continue to do what he's called me to do in this season, but I know it's going to be more. Now, what that looks like, I'm unsure, but I guarantee you I'm going to embrace it because he's given it to me. It's his and is his assignment to me.
That's right. And when you have that perspective, the only thing I can say is strap in, because he's going to amaze you. He's going to confuse you. He's going to frustrate you, deliver you,
Yeah.
and show you everything, the reason why he brought you through those journeys and destinations. Like you
Yeah.
said, that one day when you had that vision when you were laying in the top bunk and he took you back to that song. Here's the fruit of what you asked for right here.
Exactly.
Yeah, but one thing I can appreciate, and I say this with all sincerity, is that uh, when you were given the challenge, when you were handed the mantle, you didn't back down from it. You know, it may have been yours unexpectedly. It may not have been what you were looking for, but you didn't shy from it. And so I applaud you in that effort of being, obedient and following the will of God that he put in front of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for that. And he's taught me so much about me through this process. And I honor that because I don't think I would be where I'm at now without him showing me him and who he is and who I am as his daughter. And that's something I don't take lightly because he loved me just enough to give me another chance because he could have easily snuffed me out a long time ago. You know what I mean? And people be like, oh, but you didn't do any, you wasn't a bad person. It doesn't matter. When he calls your name, he's calling your name. And you ain't got no choice. So he could have easily called my name a long time ago, but he didn't. He loved me enough to say, all right, I'm gonna sit you down for a minute.
Say
And I'm gonna
that.
need you to get it right.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm like you, I thank God I obeyed too, because as much as I didn't want to, not knowing and that fear, that's a scary place to be. But I also know, like, if he's brought me to it, you say, nah, this ain't what I say, this is what you say. You say
Mhm.
you gonna bring me through it. And you
Yes.
say all things work out for my good because I love you not. Now you didn't say some things, you said all things.
All things. That's right.
And me being as stubborn as I am, I was like this. So we gonna see how you do this. and, and lo and behold, here I am, sitting
That's
before
right.
you with a smile on my face and saying, thank you that you did. Thank you that
That's
you
right.
did.
That's beautiful. Well, we're coming to a close. And one of the things we like to do with our guests is let them pick. Our target demographic is 15 to 22 years old. So we asked our guests, pick the 15-year-old or the 22-year-old, and what advice would you give to that person?
That's a good one. 22-year-old, I will say to you, the mantle is being passed to you. Listen to whose you are, know whose you are, and walk in that ever so eloquently with grace. Because as he done to me, if he brought you to it, he will bring you through it. That's it.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, you have had the honor and the pleasure of taking a few moments and talking to Miss Charlotte Garnes,
Yes.
entrepreneur, advocate, passionate fighter, and she is a warrior for the kingdom.
Yes.
It was been such a pleasure to talk with you today, and want to make sure that we stay connected because
Yes.
there are some things that definitely we're going to be able to support each other on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure meeting you all, talking with you all. And if there's ever anything I can do for the youth, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Please do.
I sure will. All right. Thank you.
All righty.